One analyst projects the entire Buccaneers season, and we tell you where he went wrong, where he went right. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
Your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into the Locked On Bucs podcast, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We want to thank you so much for making Locked On Bucs your first listen or review every single day. And don't forget to subscribe for free or follow on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, you can follow us on Twitter. I am James Yarcho, deputy editor of SB Nation's BucsNation.com, on Twitter at JYarcho_Bucs. And of course, you can follow the show at Locked On Bucs. We are here with you every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for the time being, getting ready to ramp back up to 5 days a week coming up next month in July. But as always, we want to thank our everydayers and show our appreciation for your continued support of the show. Today's episode is brought to you by Bird Dogs. Go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNFL, and they'll throw in a free custom Bird Dogs Yeti-style tumbler with every order. ESPN's Mike Clay did his team-by-team projections for the 2023 season, and he has some interesting thoughts on the Buccaneers, including wide receiver Mike Evans. But we have to start where everyone wants us to start, and that, of course, is the quarterback battle. According to Mike Clay's projections, the quarterback battle between Baker Mayfield and Kyle Trask is not going to end in training camp. It is not decided. It will not be decided. And this is going to be an ongoing theme for the 2023 season for the Buccaneers. He has Baker Mayfield projected to play 10 games, while Kyle Trask is projected to play in 7. So he has Baker Mayfield slotted for 2,427 yards, 12 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, with an additional 104 rushing yards and a touchdown on the ground. He also has Baker projected to take 27 sacks. As for Kyle Trask, Mike Clay has him at 1,609 yards, 8 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, with an extra 58 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown, and taking 18 sacks. So for the total Buccaneers quarterback position, he has 4,036 passing yards, 20 touchdowns, 15 interceptions, 162 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns, and he has the quarterbacks being sacked 45 times. It's a lot of sacks. So Mike Clay is basically showing that there's not a lot of confidence in either quarterback to get this job done, and that this may end up being kind of a throwaway year as far as the quarterback position is concerned. He has the Bucs slotted at 6.5 wins. And in that realm, you're looking at probably a top, between 7 and 10. If you're going to fall into the top 10 of the NFL draft order, maybe you're in that 11 to 13 range. Of course, it all depends on how everything shakes out. But he's looking at the Buccaneers of being essentially the bottom of the NFC South, having a high draft pick, maybe putting themselves in a position to be able to go after one of the coveted quarterbacks next year to come in and be the franchise guy. And one of the things that jumped out to me was the 45 sacks combined between Baker Mayfield and Kyle Trask. The biggest question that his projections don't answer is that a commentary on the quarterbacks, or is that a commentary on the offensive line? We've talked a lot about the offensive line on this show. You have Luke Goedeke going at right tackle, Tristan Wirfs moving to left tackle. You have, kind of a toss-up as far as what the interior is going to look like outside of Jensen. They have Filer slotted as a starting guard. You're not really sure 100% what they're going to do with the other guard position. So is this Mike Clay taking a look at this team and saying, you know what? It's a relatively young offensive line now. You have guys shifting positions, changing roles. There's going to be a learning curve. There's going to be some chemistry that needs to be built. Are they going to struggle getting into a groove, starting to trust one another, playing the way that they need to play to protect Baker or Kyle Trask? Or is this a commentary of Baker and Kyle holding the ball too long, putting themselves in danger, not getting the plays off the way that they need to be? And that's going to lead to some sacks and potentially some turnovers. Not really sure. My guess, my projection based off of Mike Clay's projections is that it's a little bit of both. We know that the offensive line struggled last year. A lot of that had to do with the injuries that they sustained all throughout the year. You had struggles by Donovan Smith, who was injured in week 1, but he just couldn't seem to get himself going. The interior was a revolving door of guys being moved and backups being brought in. Luke Gedeke struggled a lot. So 45 sacks is going to be a lot of sacks to take, but I think it's a combination in Clay's eyes of an offensive line learning to work together and struggling quarterback play. And then finally, will the winner of training camp, the training camp battle, as we've called it, of course, a lot of us believe that Baker Mayfield is going to be the starter. Will that starter play over under 10.5 games? Mike Clay is giving them the under, with Baker Mayfield winning the competition, but only starting 10 games. I'm going to go over. It depends, obviously, on how things start to roll out. If Baker Mayfield is named the starter and the Bucs start 0-4 and they're only averaging about 16 points a game, it's going to be time to move on. It's going to be time to roll out Kyle Trask, see what he can do to potentially ignite the offense. But I do think that whoever they name as the starter, this isn't going to be a back and forth situation. This isn't going to be what we saw a few years back with Jameis Winston and Ryan Fitzpatrick, where Jameis was suspended. Fitzpatrick comes out and plays really well the first couple games, struggles. Jameis comes in, then Jameis struggles against the Cincinnati Bengals. They bring Ryan Fitzpatrick out in the second half. He almost leads them to a comeback victory. We're not going to have that kind of situation. Whoever wins this camp battle, I think is going to start over 10.5 games, but I'm not going to sit here and say that I believe that they would start all 17 in order to, justify my narrative. It's going to be strictly what is the team doing? How are they performing? How does the offense look? And if things are going bad, if after 12 games they're sitting there at 4-8, they might give whoever is the backup the opportunity to start the rest of the season, see what they have going into free agency, going into the draft, to see what they're going to be able to do moving forward at the quarterback position. And if Baker starts off 4-8 and they bring in Kyle Trask and all of a sudden they end 7-9, that might be enough to give Trask the opportunity to be the starter in 2024. My guess would be if they're struggling that much, they're going to roll with a draft pick and hope that they draft a franchise quarterback. But up next, Clay isn't as bullish on the skill players on offense as he is the quarterbacks. That is coming up next here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Bucs is brought to you by Bird Dogs. Bird Dogs shorts do the exact same thing as Lululemon, but fit way better. They also fit way better than regular shorts that are made of stiff, restricting cotton, because Bird Dogs invented cloud knit fabric that looks just like khaki, but stretches so you get a slimmer fit without having to sacrifice movement. Bird Dogs also uses anti-stink, sweat, wicking fabric that keeps you cool and dry all day long. And the best part is that Bird Dogs stretch khaki shorts are designed to fit slimmer through the thigh and leg to give you a truly sculpted look. I recently just started a job where I am wearing a shirt and tie every day. And the minute I get home, I take off my dress clothes and I put on my Bird Dog shorts because they really, truly are incredibly comfortable. We just got 2 pairs in the mail from Bird Dogs along with this beautiful Bird Dogs Yeti style tumbler. So go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNFL for your free Yeti style tumbler with your order. That's birddogs.com/LockedOnNFL for a free Yeti style tumbler. You won't want to take your Bird Dogs off. We promise. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listen or review every single day. A special thank you to all our everydayers out there who are tuning in even during the dead period that we have embarked on. But we're going to continue to look at Mike Clay's 2023 Buccaneers projections. Now, our everydayers know, our casual listeners know, who we hope become everydayers because we appreciate each and every one of you. You all know what Mike Evans has done for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You know what he has done over the course of his career in the NFL. And he has been one of the constants for the Buccaneers since being drafted in 2014. And he's been a constant across the league. You know, Mike Evans is going to come away with 1,000 yards each and every season. That's all he's ever done, is get 1,000 yards or more receiving. He holds the NFL record for most consecutive seasons with 1,000 yards to start a career. He has extended that record every single season. But will the lack of faith in the quarterbacks cause Mike Clay to project that Mike Evans' streak is going to end? Nope. He projects Mike Evans to finish with 73 receptions, 1,044 yards, and 5 touchdowns, keeping his 1,000-yard record alive yet another season. But what about the other skill players on the offensive side of the ball? He has Chris Godwin slotted for 88 receptions, 972 yards, and 3 touchdowns, while the wide receiver 3, Russell Gage, has 51 receptions, 502 yards, and 3 touchdowns. And he has projected Cade Otton to finish as the top tight end on the team with 39 receptions, 443 yards, and 3 touchdowns of his own. As far as the running backs are concerned, he has Rachaad White projected to fall just a little bit short of that 1,000-yard mark, finishing with 216 carries for 907 yards and 6 touchdowns. He also has him catching 44 passes for 294 additional yards and 1 receiving touchdown. He has Rachaad White accounting for 907 of the Buccaneers' total 1,824 rushing yards. That includes the quarterbacks, that includes Chase Edmonds and Keyshawn Vaughn, and even has Chris Godwin slated for some rushing yards. So you take a look at these skill player projections and you ask, will Mike Evans get over or under 1,000 yards? Whether it's Baker, whether it's Kyle Trask, yes, Mike Evans had Tom Brady for the last 3 seasons. Before that, he had Jameis Winston, Ryan Fitzpatrick, Josh McCown, Mike Glennon. He hasn't always done it with top tier or even second tier quarterbacks. He has done a lot of this with journeyman career backups. There's no question, barring injury, in my mind, that Mike Evans with Baker and or Kyle Trask, depending on how the starts end up being split up throughout the year, is going to come away with 1,000 yards. Now, 1,044, that's cutting it a little bit close, but you know, we've seen over the last couple of years, Mike Evans miss a game or two, whether it's injury, suspension, anything like that, and he still manages to get 1,000 yards. I think it's a lock. You can slot in Mike Evans for 1,000 yards each and every year. I could be the quarterback. David could be the quarterback. Evan could be the quarterback. Any of our listeners could be the quarterback. Mike Evans is going to find a way to get you 1,000 yards. But what about Chris Godwin? We take a look at Godwin's numbers, falling short of the 1,000 yards. It's hard to have, multiple 1,000-yard receivers. He has Chris Godwin at 88 receptions. So I've set the over-under at 90. Mike Clay has the under. I'm taking the over. Chris Godwin had a tremendous season last year, even still trying to bring himself back from the injury that he suffered late in the year with that torn ACL. He's going to be the possession guy. He's going to be the short intermediate yards guy. He's going to be the move the sticks guy. And he's someone that Mayfield and Trask can trust to bring the ball in, move the chains, and keep a drive going. I think Chris Godwin will lead the team in receptions the way Mike Clay has it projected, but I think he hits over 90, might even close in on triple-digit receptions, because that's the kind of player that Chris Godwin is. He's the guy that's may not rack up the most yards in a game, but he's constantly going to get close to or actually get double-digit receptions each and every game. And then you have to worry about if you're going to double team Chris, now all of a sudden Mike Evans one-on-one with just about any corner in the league. Any quarterback is going to take Mike Evans in that situation. And then Rachaad White, Mike Clay has him slotted for just under 50% of the Buccaneers' total rushing production. So I've set the over-under at 50%, barring any late, off-season or early training camp signing of an Ezekiel Elliott or a Dalvin Cook, which I don't think is going to happen at this stage, but it's not completely out of the question. I think Rachaad White ends up with over 50% of the Buccaneers' total rushing yards. It'll be interesting to see how they work Chase Edmonds in. I could see Chase Edmonds being more of the pass catching back than the actual rushing production back. Keyshawn Vaughn's going to get snaps here and there, but overall, he hasn't really done a whole lot to impress. His playing time without any injuries ahead of him is going to be relatively limited. So I could see Rachaad White, even if he doesn't break the 1,000-yard mark, I can absolutely see him ending up with over 50% of the Buccaneers' total rushing production, both in yards and in touchdowns. But we've talked plenty about the offense now, and we're going to take a look at some of the defensive numbers that Mike Clay has for the Buccaneers in his 2023 NFL season projections. That is coming up next here on Locked On Bucs. Wrapping things up here on a Friday edition of the Locked On Bucs podcast. And offensive projections are fun, right? We have a quarterback battle. Those numbers are fun to look into. You have really solid skill position players. And of course, you like to look at those projections because some of you, I already know, are prepping for your fantasy football drafts. And of course, that's the kinds of things that you take into consideration when you're drafting players for your fantasy team. But what about the defense? The defense has to go out there and play too. And Clay has some really interesting thoughts on where the defense is going to be in 2023. So he has the Tampa Bay Buccaneers as a team with 39 sacks on the season. That's 6 fewer than he has Buccaneers quarterbacks taking. But he has the leading sacker on the team as Shaquille Barrett projected at 6. Then what's really interesting is he has Vita Vea slotted at 5.7 as the number 2 sack guy on the team, and Joe Tryon-Shoyinka at 5.6. So Mike Clay has some faith in Joe Tryon-Shoyinka taking the next step and really starting to learn how to finish on some of these plays that I've been harping on, since last season, talking about how Tryon-Shoyinka has to learn how to finish. His get off is great. His pursuit is great. He just hasn't finished the plays, and it has led to some offensive production for the opposing team. He has Lavonte David as the team's leading tackler with 131. Devin White coming in second with 125. Devin White projected at 3.7 sacks. Lavonte David projected with 1.4. And then finally, the projections in the secondary is 9.9 interceptions. Let's just round that up to an even 10. So he's saying the corners and the safeties are going to combine to get 10 interceptions on the season, led by Ryan Neal, the new safety for the Buccaneers. He has Neal projected at 3.2 interceptions, followed by Carlton Davis at 2.3, Jamel Dean at 1.7, and Antoine Winfield Jr. right behind at 1.6. So the questions that I have that I want you guys to answer in the YouTube comments, you can answer them on Twitter at Locked On Bucs or at the email address that I'll drop at the end of the show. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers as a team, over or under 39.5 sacks. Clay has the under at 39. I'm going to take the over. Maybe not by much, maybe around the 42, 43 mark. I think Shaq Barrett, as long as he's fully ready to roll at the beginning of the season, I see him closer at 8.5, 9 sacks than 6. And I hope that Mike Clay is right on Joe Tryon-Shoyinka. That's going to be a storyline that I follow all off season long, all season long, something that I'm going to continue to keep an eye on and bring up on this show. But I think 6 is a little bit on the low end. And again, I'm sure that Clay is taking into consideration the torn Achilles, recovery from that. He's not going to be 100% in week 1. It's going to take him a little bit more time to get fully back to his normal self. But I do like Shaq Barrett over 6 sacks. So for that reason and that reason alone, I am going to take the over on 39.5. The next one that I have is Joe Tryon-Shoyinka over under 5.5 sacks. So Clay has the over. I want to go over. I really, really do. I see so much potential in Tryon-Shoyinka. He's a lot of fun to watch. And again, as I mentioned, he's got a great get off. He's got great pursuit. He has to learn to finish. And I know that's something that they're working on. That is something that Tryon-Shoyinka himself is aware of, and it is working really, really hard to be able to do that because he wants to justify the first round pick. He wants to show that he is a solid edge rusher. I'm not going to say great. I'm not going to say elite, but he wants to show that he is a solid edge rusher that can get to the quarterback, finish the play, and put the defense in a good position. I got to take the under. I think it's going to be more in that 4 to 5 range. I don't think he's getting 5.5 or more. I hope I'm wrong. I hope some of you bookmark this and bring it up in week 12 when Tryon-Shoyinka has his 7th sack of the season and says, James, you were wrong. You were wrong. I will gladly be wrong about that. And finally, is Ryan Neal going to lead the team in interceptions? I say no. I think this is going to be a huge year for Jamel Dean. Jamel Dean got his contract, took a little bit less money than he probably could have gotten on the open market to, again, stay in Tampa, just like his partner on the other side, Carlton Davis, did. I think he had a down year last year, really is what that boils down to. Much like Sean Murphy-Bunting had kind of a down year. Yeah, he hurt his arm, struggled in the playoffs when he came back. He has moved on, but I think Jamel Dean is going to be the interception guy. And a lot of that stems from the fact that Carlton Davis may not get a ton of opportunities. Quarterbacks are going to tend to look away from Carlton Davis. Kirk Cousins is going to, week 1, he's going to throw it up to Justin Jefferson numerous times. We're talking probably 10 to 15 targets for Jefferson in week 1. Carlton Davis is going to be the guy responsible for that. So there's going to be opportunity there. But overall, over the course of the season, Jamel Dean is going to have the ball thrown his way more often than Carlton Davis is. That's going to lead to opportunity for Jamel Dean to really make some big plays, whether that's pass breakups or interceptions. I do think that Ryan Neal ends up leading the safeties in interceptions. He has a nose for the football. He's going to be able to bring it down. I could see him with a 3 or 4 interception year. But I think for Jamel Dean, you're looking at 5-6 interceptions from him this year. Carlton Davis, probably around 2 or 3, right where Clay has it projected. Antoine Winfield Jr., again, probably in that 2 to 3 range. Clay has him just under 2 projected on the year. I'd say 2 is a pretty solid number for him because he is going to be playing all over the field. So the opportunities as far as safety is concerned, probably going to lean more towards Neal than it is for Antoine Winfield Jr. But I'm predicting a big, big season for Jamel Dean. I'm talking leads the team in pass breakups, leads the team in interceptions, and might once again lead the team in opposing quarterback rating when targeted. Jamel Dean is an incredibly talented corner. This is going to be a big, big season for him. And I think against what Mike Clay has projected, that Jamel Dean is going to be the guy that leads the team in interceptions. So I would love to hear your guys' thoughts on all of this. Is Mike Evans going to get his 1,000 yards? Is Chris Godwin going to get over 90 receptions? Who leads the team in interceptions? Is Joe Tryon-Shoyinka going to break 5.5 sacks? Is the team going to break 40 sacks altogether? And finally, who whoever wins the quarterback battle, are they going to start more or less than 10 games this season? Drop all of those in the YouTube comments. Send them to us on Twitter at Locked On Bucks. Email them to lockedonbuckspodcast@gmail.com. But I want to thank each and every one of you for making Locked On Bucks your first listen or review every day. And a special shout out to all of our everydayers. We certainly appreciate each and every one of you who keep coming back all year long to listen about your beloved Tampa Bay Buccaneers. For David Harrison, I am James Yarcho. Make sure that you are following us on Twitter at JYarcho_Bucks, at DHarrison82. My work is over at BucksNation.com. David is on BucksGameDay.com, part of Sports Illustrated's Fan Nation, covering your Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding weekend. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. We thank you so much for joining us right here on Locked On Bucks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.